everyone, it's Monica from My Big Camera. In this video, we will be taking you behind the scenes to show you how to pose an older baby in 3 sleeping newborn poses. Most photographers will tell you that the ideal window to photograph newborns is within the first 2 weeks. But what if you have a client that contacts you after that window? What if the baby is a month old or 2 months old? Do you turn them away or take the session? We will show you exactly how we pose older babies safely and comfortably, and how we transition and soothe them so that you can hopefully feel more confident going into your next newborn session with an older baby. Alright, so let's jump into our studio. Okay, so we're actually using our daughter who just turned 6 months old for this demo, so she is definitely a lot bigger, chunkier, more alert, and more stiff than a younger baby normally would be. But the strategies that we will be using, we use for newborn babies as well as older newborns, generally up to 2 months old depending on the baby. Before I even set baby down on the beanbag, I make sure everything is ready and I have baby dressed in whatever I want for the first pose. Make sure baby is nice and full, and then you can get mom to get baby drowsy. However, I do recommend that after baby is fed that you take baby from mom and rock them yourself, because sometimes babies will get fussy and want to nurse again if mom is rocking them. It also makes it easier to set the baby down and to sort of position them a little bit in your arms beforehand. Once you have baby asleep, you can try to set them down for the first pose. If the baby starts to squirm a bit as you try to set them down, gently bounce or rock them until they settle again. We will be starting off with the Tushy Up Pose, so I'm trying to set her down onto her tummy. She fussed a little bit, but as soon as I put her down, I made sure to turn her head towards the light and tuck her hand under her face and set her face down on top of her hand. To calm her down, I'm just gently stroking between her eyes. Honestly, it's like a magical mute button. As long as baby is a bit drowsy, it generally works like a charm. And now I'm just gently patting her back to settle her. Babies love the soothing vibration and will most likely settle. Now that I have her settled, I'm going to pose her legs. Her legs are very stiff and chunky, so they're a lot harder to try to position under her than with a younger baby, but basically I'm just folding her back foot over the one closer to the camera and then bringing her knees forward and tucking them underneath her belly. If she stirs, then I'll just pat her on the back to settle her again. She did move her hand out of position, so I'm just patting her to settle her while keeping my right hand on her bum and legs to keep them in position. Just basically making small movements and then patting her to keep her settled. Since older babies tend to wake easier, you definitely want to keep movements very small and do lots of extra soothing to keep them asleep. Don't worry about perfecting the pose right away. You can always perfect it after you get a couple of safety shots. Now I'm going to repose her head and her hand. Basically, I'm just trying to straighten out her fingers and flattening out her hand as best as I can. Then bring it close to her face, and while holding it in place with my thumb, I'm using my index finger to gently lift her chin, and with my other hand, use it to lift her head to bring her face forward so her cheek rests on top of her hand. You can see she woke up a little bit when I did this, so I'm just soothing her until she settles while holding her hand in place. Her legs also popped out of position. You can prevent this if you have a spotter or even a parent. You can just get them to put their hand on baby's bum to keep their legs in place while you pose their face and hands. I am now adding a large posing bean under her head and hands to lift up her head, and a smaller one under her legs to lift up her bum. With older babies, you should avoid lifting their bum up too much since they're not as flexible as newborns and their backs don't arch as much. I'm also turning her bum toward the camera to try to get her knee to touch her elbow as best as I can. She's really stiff, so she's not really letting me bend her too much, which is totally fine. I don't want her to be uncomfortable or to put any strain on her body. But ideally, if you can get that knee up to the elbow, that's ideal. You can see that she always moves her legs and bum back into a more comfortable position, which again is totally fine for me. It will still be a beautiful photo. One thing I wanted to mention is that when you take on an older newborn, you need to manage the client's expectations. Just remind them that the baby may not sleep the whole time or may not sleep at all, and that you may not be able to get any newborn sleeping type poses. But try to keep it very simple. Do simple newborn poses that older newborns can do. Tummy poses, chin on arms, side lying, and wrapped poses all usually work really great. Avoid super curly poses like taco, froggy, and other similar poses because older babies are usually not as flexible as newborns are and usually don't like those types of poses. If you think a baby will do them, then you can definitely attempt it, but otherwise I would just suggest sticking to easier poses. Back poses can work too, but unless a baby is swaddled, babies tend to have a pretty strong startle reflex and may startle awake out of the pose. If baby is alert and awake, then you can definitely do some photos of baby on its back. It's a good idea to be extra prepared with a number of setups that you can do with baby awake in case baby doesn't want to sleep. It's hard to tell from the angle of the filming camera, but she's posed completely parallel to the camera, so her face and bum are at the same focal length and I'm shooting directly in front of her. So a full length shot is the main one that I want to get. I will then try to go in for a couple of close-ups and also some from above. Remember to always wear your camera strap when shooting from above because you never want to risk your camera falling onto a baby. So now that I have my safety shots, I'm going to try to fix her hand and face. Just like before, get those fingers flat and then lift her face forward and onto her hand. Then I'm going to redo the same shots as before. As you can probably tell, newborn photography requires a lot of time and patience, but just take your time and move slowly to keep baby settled. I also wanted to mention that although you can't see it, we have a white noise machine going and we keep the room quite warm, usually around 75 degrees Fahrenheit, which we have found to usually be the perfect temperature to keep babies sleeping without overheating them. Babies love warmth and will generally sleep really well if they're nice and warm. If you're not able to heat up the whole room, you can use a small space heater, but just be careful not to have the heater blowing directly on the baby because you don't want them overheating. If baby starts to turn red or if the back of their neck is sweaty, then they are too warm and you need to cool them down. Always keep baby comfortable and safe. And just in case you're wondering, my daughter's cheeks are red because she's teething really badly right now, so her cheeks are always super red. She's very comfortable without being too warm or too cold. Here are the final shots. These are all taken at f2.8, ISO 100, and shutter speed 1/160th of a second. If you're interested in our lighting setup for newborns, we actually have a whole video on it, so I'll link it up in the cards in case you're interested in checking it out. So next pose that we will be transitioning her into is sort of an angled tummy pose. I don't actually know what this pose is called, but it's a really easy one to do right after the Tushy Up Pose. I'm first going to remove the posing bean under her legs. And then I'm going to move her bum back towards the backdrop so that her body is more angled towards the light. My light is positioned on the left side at a 45-degree angle towards the baby. I'm now just adding a larger posing bean under her face and hands so that it's higher than the rest of her body. And I'm going to try to move her face onto her hand again, and you can see that this woke her up a little bit, so I'm just going to get her settled again and gently but firmly hold her in place. So now I'm just tucking a wrap around her body to get a bit of a different look. This is a great way to avoid taking off the diaper. With an older baby, I would suggest leaving the diaper on unless they're super sleepy, because if they poop or pee, they will probably wake up very upset and may not fall back asleep. So I usually stick to wraps I can swap out and a simple diaper cover. So for this pose, I'm actually shooting at a 45-degree angle, basically right beside my light. My camera is angled right at her face, so I could get all of her little features and have her body more blurred out in the background. I'll also do some close-up shots and a couple of shots from above. Now that I have my practice shots, I'm going to perfect the pose by lifting her face onto her hand a little bit better. When doing this pose, be mindful of their mouths being open. A lot of babies like to open their mouth when in this position, which doesn't look the greatest in the photos, so just gently close their mouth by lifting up their chin with your finger. Also be careful not to stretch their neck too much. This can cause a baby to have trouble breathing, so always be careful posing babies as they are tiny humans that you need to be super gentle with. If you notice the baby's body moving up and down too much when they breathe in and out, then you probably have their chin extended up too much and need to get them out of that position right away. Okay, so the next pose that I will be demonstrating is the sideline pose. You can either transition from the sideline to tushy up or tummy to the sideline like I am doing here. I actually normally like to do the sideline pose after a wrapped pose and then transition to tushy up, but since this is the first time that I've attempted this pose with my daughter since she was a newborn, I decided to do it last just in case she decided she was done with the session. Now, I completely underestimated how heavy and big she was and didn't really do the best job turning her, so she started to fuss a little bit. With a younger baby, you shouldn't have any issues. So just try to grab their bum and feet with one hand and the top of their body with the other. I had to do this separately because of how long and big she was. But once I got her flipped onto her side, I just tried to settle her again. While still holding her hands in place, I'm going to stack her legs and feet on top of each other with my other hand. I try to stack her two hands on top of each other and hold them in place so she doesn't startle herself awake, which might happen if you leave their hands free. Once she's settled, I'm going to lift her head up just like before and lift it onto her hands while still holding her hands in place. If you hold them in position and gently rock them a bit, baby will generally settle into the position really well. I'm just working on straightening out those fingers while still gently rocking her to keep her settled and hold her head and hands in place. And while holding her head and hands in place, I'm going to fix her feet and legs. Again, if you have an assistant or a parent that can hold their legs while you position the hands and face, this will be a lot easier and you can avoid them moving out of position. Now I'm just going to angle her face up towards the light a little bit. In order to prevent her from startling out of position, I'm actually holding her arms while I put on the headband with my other hand. It's not exactly the easiest thing to do, but it'll keep her settled. I like to use jersey tie-back headbands that are really easy to slip on and off and are really soft on baby's head. I make a lot of my own tie-backs, and if you're interested in learning on how to make some, I have a video tutorial on it, and I'll link that up in the cards in case you're interested. I can't get her fingers completely straight, but I'm going to take my practice shots and then try again. Here I'm just stretching out the blanket. It's best to use stretchy fabrics for your backdrops and stretch them as much as possible to get rid of any wrinkles, because that will make editing so much easier. However, if you do have a couple of wrinkles in your blanket, our free frequency separation action works great for removing the wrinkles in Photoshop. I'll put the link to where you can download our free action set down in the description box. So now that I have my practice shots, I'm adding a wrap to cover her diaper cover. And now I'm going to retake my shots. The shots I always aim to get are a full body one at a 45-degree angle, basically right beside my light, then some close-ups, some from above, and also one from the front directly parallel to her body. Her head and upper body are so heavy, so it makes it hard to lift up her head enough, but I'm just adding another bean underneath to lift it up a little bit more, and then I'm going to try to perfect the pose. If you haven't noticed, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so you really don't need to do this if you don't want to, but I just try to make sure the cheek doesn't look too squished. One other thing I wanted to mention is that when starting out especially, stick to just a couple of very basic neutral colors for your backdrop. Cream, white, gray, and a soft pink are pretty much all you really need in the beginning. Those are also the most flattering colors for baby's skin tone, and they won't cause color casts on baby's face that you'll need to remove later in Photoshop. Plus, it's really easy to pretty much add any color accessories that you would like since the backdrop is so neutral. You really don't need much when you're starting out, even if you just start off with a cream backdrop and a cream wrap. You can easily use those for both boys and girls and create some really beautiful organic photos that the parents will love. And if you're interested in learning how to edit newborn baby skin in Photoshop, I will link an editing video up in the cards in case you wanted to check it out. That's it. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and that you feel more confident in posing newborns and older babies. Please give this video a like if you found it helpful, as it really helps out our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on that notification bell if you want to be notified the next time we release another video. I will link our posing playlist up in the cards in case you're interested in more posing videos. And if you're interested in our free Photoshop actions for editing newborns and portraits, I'll leave the link for that down in the description. Bye for now, and remember, keep creating.